Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, a podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, James and I talk about two opposite ways of doing business, i.e. creating your stuff. One is to start by making the creation more complicated than it needs to be, maybe overthinking it. The polar opposite to that is jumping right into the creative part without thinking through who's your audience, what's it for, what do you want this book or piece of art or performance to do for people. Today we're discussing the ground in between those two, the happy middle. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, Pat.
Yes, James.
I'm down in the science area of the Gifted Underachievers Clubhouse.
Science area, excellent. Good.
Yeah, and I've just written this sentence. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Experimental details of salvochromatic measurements and how to calculate the pi star value from the wavelength of maximum absorbance of 4-nitroanisole in solution have been described.
Fuck.
It should be further noted that using a software package for the determination of the wavelengths of maximum absorbance for the dye in each solution is strongly recommended.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound complicated?
It does.
Maybe a little too complicated.
Well, and it is. And for listeners, that was so complicated that James had to wag his finger at just about every word.
Yeah. But to keep the pace, it's like one of those TikTok things.
Yeah,
metronome. Yeah. My finger metronome.
Your finger metronome.
Right, which I've got 6 of them on
a memoir. Don't get me started on your damn fingers. Okay, yeah, that was complicated. What's your point?
Doesn't it feel like sometimes we overcomplicate things that could be a lot simpler?
Yeah. Do you have a simpler version of those 2 sentences yet?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about so here I am. I will be creative A, right? Creative person A. And I think I want to start this project. And then I'm like, well, I've got to do the research, which means I have to go here and I have to go there and I have to do this and I have to do that. And oh gosh, the thing that I need is in Czechoslovakia. Mm-hmm. How am I going to get to Czechoslovakia? Okay, so now I need a grant because I've got to get to Czechoslovakia. And then, of course, I want to interview somebody because that's a very important detail of the story that they would hold and they could help me get the nuance right. So how am I going to get in touch? And then on and on and on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
And then there's creative person B who says, I want to write a really compelling story that explores a subtle aspect of what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start. Who's going to be more successful, A or B?
Okay. Oh, you know what? There's a bit of nuance here because I think the part that might be missing from both perspectives is what's it about? What's the meaning? Where's the core of the idea? You could say I want to write about an aspect of human experience. That's just too general. And then you can say I need to go to Czech Republic because I have all this detail stuff I want to do over there, and that's too specific. You need to have some way of not overcomplicating, but without also oversimplifying whatever you're creating. And I think a lot of that happens in the doing, but it really helps to have, depending on your tendency, right, to stop yourself from either overcomplicating or oversimplifying. Yeah, that's kind of where I land on that is neither one is great. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really sharp and precise. That they're both going to slam into a brick wall.
Yeah.
Right? Because one is overthinking and the other person is underthinking and thinking, well, I'll just start it. And, the one side is I'll just start it and it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that can work. There's definitely exceptions to every rule. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is like, oh, I've got to think about every eventuality and every need that I have even before I've started. Yeah. And, for some people that seems to work. But I think for most of us, that's a recipe for running into avoidance.
Oh my God.
because one just feels overwhelming. Oh my God, this is too huge of a project. I'm going to
Mhm.
put it on the back burner.
Yeah.
And the other person gets started and, just runs into that brick wall of, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I didn't think this through and I need to do a lot more of this or that. And so I've got to go back to the beginning even
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
start over.
That's a good one, and I'm thinking about the novel I'm working on, the Frankenstein novel. I realized that I cannot actually write another scene. I've got about 8,000 words, but maybe more actually. But I have to stop for a minute and figure out more about the character. I cannot write in a vacuum, and that was made apparent to me on this last 3-day novel weekend where the first 8,000 words was one day of writing, and I didn't even know what gender the character was, and it made it very, very slippery
Mm.
to write.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up, so I have all these specific questions about the 3-day novel thing, which is how much pre-planning can you do and, and that
Mm.
kind of thing. But I think the sticking to the relevant point is you're in this context where you have 3 days to write. Is there a minimum amount of words that you have to write?
They like, 25,000 is good. 100
So you
pages.
got
It's a
to,
novella, really.
that's about 8,000 words a day. So
Yeah, 8 to 10, because you might end up throwing some out.
yeah. And so, you have to have, if you're just sort of starting, okay, here it is, the clock has begun, and you don't really have a strong specific sense of what you get, what you're going to do, you're going to run into those kinds of problems.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the context forces you to push through
Mhm.
and adjust.
Yes, exactly. You have to live with your lack of preparation or your over preparation, perhaps. I've never prepared for it, but we don't want to get sidetracked onto that particular experience. Um, So you have a very interesting job in terms of the fact that you have to conceptualize your approach to a book pretty thoroughly before you really start writing it. And you do that probably a number of ways, but how do you stop from getting too hung up on, oh, it's got to end this way, or oh, I've
Yeah.
got to bring in this?
Well, I have a very defined, routine that I do, right? And
Mm.
so I say to everybody who I work with, you're going to get frustrated with me because there's going to be a long beginning period where you're not going to see the results of the work. You're not going to see, written words on a page,
Yeah,
but all of that preparatory work is incredibly important
yeah,
because we have to really have a firm understanding of what it is we're going to write. And we have to have the same understanding of what
right.
it is that we're going to write. And then the other piece of that, though, is that it can't go on forever, right? So
Mhm.
you could see, let's do all our interviews up, first, or let's do this or that. And really, it's more about getting that big picture, look at, okay, what are we going to write about? What is it going to say? What is the point? What are the goals? And then looking at what is the structure? What is the arc, the narrative
Mhm.
arc?
Mhm.
And, you don't even really get into the specific points of like, we're going to do this chapter, that chapter, that chapter. It's more just, we're going to start here and end here.
Yeah,
And then, that evolves into understanding what you need to do and then understanding what chapter one is going to be. And then you start with chapter one.
yeah,
So it's the process that I use is designed to try to do enough thinking, but not too much
yeah.
thinking.
Enough context, but not so much that you go down rabbit holes and are spinning your wheels.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm just thinking, that's the thing that can hang writers up that I work with because I do a little bit of book coaching too, and it's when there's this sort of perfectionistic going over of stuff that's already been written, before you know how the book's going to end, because you can plan it out, but you might get a better idea later and take it in a different direction. Um,
Hmm.
that will really hogtie, a writer. They can't see beyond this page having to be perfect. And yeah,
Right.
some writers say they write that way. But you know what? I think we're straying from the point actually, because the idea is overcomplicating versus oversimplifying.
Hmm.
The issue with oversimplifying is that you don't have enough material or your well isn't full enough. You've started
Hmm.
before you filled your well, and so you don't have anything to draw on when you put your bucket down. So overcomplicating is one thing, oversimplifying is equally hard on the project, basically. Both
Mhm.
of them can lead you to stall out for long periods. I know for sure that happens in writing. I'm not so sure about other creative pursuits, but I believe it
Sure.
probably does.
Yeah. So I think this is true for all creative endeavors, right?
Yeah,
So there's the person who overthinks it and then never gets anything done,
yeah,
or the process is incredibly slow and laborious and maybe doesn't achieve the result that they wanted because there's just so much thinking going on and
yeah,
overthinking. And there's the person who just rushes and says I'm going to slap paint on a canvas until I figure out what it is I want to say.
yeah,
And there needs to be some sort of happy medium there, some sort of balance. I would imagine you've seen this where you send pieces to back to a client saying, this needs to be reworked.
yeah.
Then there's the client who gets it back to you a month later
Uh-huh.
and it's completely overthought and overdone and misses all, it kind of blows it apart because they took so much time and overthought it. And then there's the person who you get it back, like you send it out and an hour later they've, sent back the fix, the revision. And it's like, there's no way that you could have done that quickly.
Well, not just that, but you can tell they've put in a comma and changed a word. They haven't actually paid any attention to the problem.
Hmm.
That you've pointed out, and that's one thing to say, I don't agree with you that that's a problem, but it's another thing to say 100% that's a problem. Now I'm going to give it 30 seconds of my time, and here you
Hmm.
go. And it's like,
Yeah.
if we were in a factory together, I'd fire you, because this is not how you improve stuff. You got to actually do the improvements, but some people are very impatient. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I want to interject here because I think it's not just creative work, period. It's life, actually. There are people who, and sometimes it's because they have ADHD or something, but there are people who overthink things to the point where they're paralyzed. They cannot, for the life of them, purge their old belongings because
Mhm.
everything has so much meaning, and they can't see the big picture, which is that if you make space, you'll be happier. If you're not tripping over shit in the night because you can't get rid of it, you'll be less likely to break your fucking ankle. So there's that, but there's also the idea that we can do it with everything. We can do it with cooking. Oh, I've got guests tomorrow. I want to make a chicken soup that'll blow their socks off.
Well, I'm
Sandwich
thinking,
fixings.
the couple that's having their first kid, right? And one,
Yeah,
you've got to go out and buy $60,000 worth of kids stuff.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
feel prepared, and the other person is like, all we need is, diapers and a nipple.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's these sort of situational. So I want to tell you, you've given your sort of method for avoiding either extreme in your ghostwriting work. I write courses as well as edit and
Mhm.
write books, and the every idea I have on a course is starts as a flip chart page,
Really?
and it never takes more than a page on the flip chart. I might iterate that page more than once, but it never strays beyond the page because I do it sort of a bubble diagram thing.
Hmm.
And it takes 15 minutes and that drives my behavior for the next 6 months while I create the course.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
so you mentioned something when we were, hashing this out before we started recording.
Oh, minimum viable product. I came across that when I was sort of learning how to create courses. And I think my flip chart approach, which I learned, I don't know when, I love flip charts, but like decades ago, it's just how I think, right? But this minimum viable product thing is the idea that instead of creating, a 10 module course with all the photography beautiful and the screenshots and everything, say an online course, you don't do that until you figure out if the course works, if people want it. You figure out your
Mhm.
audience, right? Which is probably similar to your ghostwriting. You didn't mention the word audience, but at some point in that early stage, you're thinking about who your audience is for the book.
Yeah.
Same thing for courses. If you don't know, there's no point in spending 200 hours on a course if you don't know if there's an audience for it. Like creating a course, which is how long
Right.
it takes me to create a course on 100 to 200 hours. Like it's a big investment.
Wow.
So the minimum viable product idea is rather than, I mean, some people have taken it to the extreme of actually checking if they have a following, checking with their following and saying, would you be interested in a course on this? Would you take this
Mhm.
survey? What's the most important part of that topic for you? And then they create like a 40-minute webinar. And if that
Mhm.
sells, then they know that there's a market, a bit of a market, and they do research with the webinar people, like sort of like focus group study almost.
Mhm.
And then they create the course iteratively so that they've never invested more time than they'll get some kind of return on, even if all their return
Right.
is just information. So let's say your minimum viable product is something nobody wants. Well, you've only lost 2 hours or 5 hours
Yeah.
of your time.
So I'm trying to think of like other domains, and one of the things that came to mind is if you go to YouTube now, you can find tons and tons and tons of these little movies,
Yeah.
movielets. Some are like 5 minutes, some are
Hmm.
10, 15 minutes. And I could see if you're a screenwriter or you are somehow wanting to build a career or build the viability of a project,
Yeah.
you can start out, do this 5 minute movie that sort of encapsulates some core of what it is and see, what happens and use
Yeah.
that as what you're building.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't be surprised if, because movies are, I guess they're cheaper now than they used to be, but there can be budgetary restrictions around location and talent and, all that
Yeah.
stuff and equipment and distribution. So why wouldn't you do a shorter one? I'm just thinking what popped into my head too was music videos. I think
Mhm.
some people who started in the world of music videos, actually were invited to work with, bigger projects because of their chops
Mhm.
being displayed in a much smaller
Yeah.
format.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the value of building upon that, but I'm
Yeah,
thinking more about this project where you're the mid-level. And you're saying, okay, what do I do next? I'm not
yeah,
sure. I have some ideas. Here's some ways that I can test. You can almost do like some A/B type testing,
yeah.
to see what happens and what the reaction is, and try and refine so that when you do get to that point where it's now time to put in that maximum investment to produce the fuller piece,
Mhm.
you're a lot more secure and knowledgeable and ready, and maybe there's an audience for it, maybe you've already got a little bit more backing, if
Right. Yeah. And, you can think of yourself as your own research and development department. Again, the problem becomes time. And I'm wondering if AI could help with that. But if you're your own R&D department, well, here's a real life example. I don't know if you know this. I've been messing around with the Gifted Underachievers website. Huh? I hate to break it to you
you
right
have
here,
it. I have it.
right here in
When
public. Not so
recent.
much the website, but the last post that we put out, which is actually, it just came out 3 minutes ago. Anyway,
Oh,
that episode 61.
okay.
And but I gave you a heads up. I put
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
two goals, two things. One, I added if you want merch, because we have merch, you can buy it. Here's the link. And the other one was that here's our Ko-fi page, it's a little fundraising thing. You can buy some coffee or whatever. But our goal, which we have talked about together, was to create a little series of booklets based on the advice we've gotten from our gifted achiever guests on how they create and sustain an artistic career that makes them
Yeah.
money and has, allows them to have capacity because they're not fucking exhausted all the time. And that they have an audience. They built an audience. And so that we talked about that idea. And I'm thinking our
Mhm.
minimum viable product for that, would it be one book? Would it be like a free download? Like what we could mess around with the concept of minimum viable creative product in this collaboration that we do together,
Yeah.
the podcast, and just fuck, am I proposing an experiment?
I think you're proposing a whole project.
Oh yeah, yeah, no doubt. No
So
doubt.
that involves multiple experiments.
Yeah.
So
Guilty as
yeah.
charged. Too many ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, this is thinking that there's only one alien egg, and then going a little deeper into the spaceship, and you see like a vast sea of alien eggs.
You're hilarious. Anyway, that's a way to gauge overcomplicating versus simplifying. Simplifying would be like, yeah, we're going to put out a line of books, it'll be great.
Yeah.
Overcomplicating would be here's book one, here's book two, without having actually looked over our transcripts of the interviews and said, what's really useful in here, and how can we build a useful download or an ebook around these concepts, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
yeah,
running, taking, this minimal viable project or product approach would be taking one idea that we think is really good and would work,
yeah,
finding a small way to get it out,
yeah.
see what the response is,
See if everyone wants
and,
it.
move from there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. That works.
just one alien egg.
Yeah. One alien egg at a time.
Well, so what do we think? I do the flip chart version, you do your sort of context version. We both seem to have the beginning of the overcomplicating versus simplifying question nailed in our own processes. Uh,
Hmm.
I guess the other part of that is how taking either extreme affects your ability to complete a project, because that's really the goal, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
if it's overcomplicating, let's say you have a subscription, community for artists, and
Hmm.
you've got all these bells and whistles that you think artists would love. Like there's a little breakout room for people who, are trying to create courses, and another breakout room for people who are even trying to get into galleries or whatever. And then you're like, what's the user experience? They get into your ecosystem and they don't know which room to go to because they want to do both things. There's
Hmm.
no it's too much. It's too much choice, like a supermarket, existential crisis time, because you're not sure if this cereal is better than that cereal and you don't know the cost per ounce, and you're just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna not buy any cereal. And you leave.
Right. Right. Yeah. Choice overwhelm.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
what's the so there's two aspects to that. One is that you create something overcomplicated, and then A, your user doesn't know how to use it, and B, also maybe it's way slower to get it up and running.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes to all of that, right? So you overcomplicate things and so you make it, complicated for your audience to really sort of know what is this and, it does is it something that I'm actually interested in? But I think the other piece of that is when you overcomplicate you make it, it's like your eyes are too big for your capacity plate,
Yeah,
right?
cool.
You just don't have the capacity to be able to achieve it.
Yeah.
If you go too simple, then you're not actually using the capacity that you have.
Are
And
you a
so
genius?
I don't know, probably not. But but so where's that happy medium,
Yeah.
right? And so I think, we talk a lot about wanting to explore how to make more money as a creative and how to build capacity as a creative. But maybe there's another, way to look at that capacity piece too, which is how to best use the capacity that you have.
That's a good one.
And that's part of what this is. And I think this minimum viable product idea, I think there's a lot of innovation around that idea that could be done. And I would task listeners to share ideas with us,
What kinds of ideas?
whatever they come up with. Um, if they say, yeah, geez, I always overthink things and I end up filling volumes of folders in my computer, but never actually getting the thing done. Or if it is done, it's so complex and complicated that, nobody knows what it is. And then there's the person who's like, yeah, I just start and then I sort of run out of steam. And so then I get another idea and that excites me and I just start and then I kind of run out of steam. And
Wow.
so, this minimum viable product is I'm going to have a really concise idea of something
Yeah,
that I'm going to use to test. And I'm going to create that and move from there. And so I'm curious what other ideas or what innovations upon that will
makes sense.
listeners come up with?
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much.
All right.
Good job.
Bye.
Da-na-na-na. Are we oversimplifying the ending of this piece?
Yeah, probably.
We need a dirty joke, but neither one of us has one. Okay, good enough.
Oh, I got one.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah, did you hear about the one cannibal that passed the other cannibal on the trail?
No.
That's the joke.
The one cannibal that passed the other cannibal on the trail?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
The key word is past.
Oh, oh shit. Did you
Did
make
I
it
make
up?
that? No, I can't. I'm not going to claim writing credit on that.
I wouldn't either. Thanks so much for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Hope you have a great creative week.